Welcome to Insight, everyone. I'm Nnamdi Odipo. On this episode, we take a look at the role and viability of two sectors, one formal and the other informal. The first is a sector largely responsible for most of the materials we rely on for infrastructural development and instruments of daily use, be it energy source or indeed other stuff like fertilizers used for agriculture. I'm talking about mining. Much as we know that mining has huge economic and social impact, we also do know that there is a linkage between mining and our future. We will x-ray Nigeria's mining legacy, current challenges and future prospects. And the other sector is the arts and poetry in particular. We will speak with a creative, with a great deal of talent in the spoken word. Elizabeth Omori is here. It's good to have you here, Liz. Bring us up to speed on your segment for this episode.
On the Media Review segment this week, we shall take a look at the reopening of schools for exit classes and measures to further contain the spread of infections amongst those concerned.
Very well, then let's open up with the discussion. My first guest is the Minister of State for Mines and Steel Development, Dr. Uchechukwu Oga. Welcome to Insight.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here.
There are a number of issues when it comes to unlocking the economic potentials of the solid mineral sector. I recall your first public remark as Minister of State in August, sometime in 2019, when you said work is needed to lift the sector to enviable heights. And I just paraphrased there. These were not your exact words. Let's open up this discourse with you giving the viewer an idea of where we are in terms of vision, a policy formulation, and how the entire scenario may have been impacted by COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you. Well, I want to say that first I want to thank God for it's almost a year being in the office. I can tell you within this 1 year it's been a year of eventful activities. Like I said, when we came in, that we are here to do the work. And since we came, both myself and my colleague, the minister, we've been able to drive this ministry to a position of enviable height that a lot of investors are calling to see. We never knew there's a lot of potentials here. When the ministry basically was created for one, as a means of diversification of the economy, two, as for industrialization, three is for job creation, the four is to ensure that there is value addition for mineral, and then for wealth creation, and which we call the high five in the ministry. And if you look at it, we've been able to showcase the meaningful activities in driving this process and in ensuring that what we have come to do is currently what we are doing. And you see, taking from our predecessors, we are taking the ministry to the next level, that even when other people will come there, they will see the visible work that we have done. And then currently everybody in Nigeria knows that there is solid mineral or Ministry of Mines and Steel Development, and that is a ministry, or that is a sector to go for the future.
Okay, great. I will take the high five you mentioned as the vision. But now I would like for you to put a correlation between the vision that you had upon inception of office 1 year ago and the reality on ground now. Are you just as convinced that the opportunities still abound within the sector and subsectors such as mining, even in spite, in spite of our current reality that is COVID-19? Do you think there are opportunities out there for investors?
Of course, there are great opportunities. You see, sometimes people do not understand when you talk about mining. Mining is not only about the precious metal. We talk about even limestone. Today in Nigeria, all the cement and the aggregates, they are all about mining. So when you talk about opportunity, there are bound great opportunities in the mining sector. Okay. Nigeria mining sector has not been tapped. It's just at the tip of it. So there's a lot of potential that are bound in the sector, and we believe that it is the future, it's the hope, it's the means of leaving the oil and focusing on another sector. It might you might understand. Let me remind you that mining started before oil and gas.
Very true.
Mining, most of the money used in developing the oil and gas came from mining and agriculture. So mining, before the indigenization, Nigeria was known mainly for mining and agriculture. And you can understand that even Tinkan Island was named because tin was an ex root for tin in Nigeria. So Nigeria was known for tin export, for columbine export, and other minerals. So for us, I believe the future for the mining sector is so much that there is much for us to do in the sector in terms of investment. So we are encouraging a lot of investors to come into the sector, because apart from limestone and quarry, there are other minerals that investors need to come and invest in.
Very well, very well. Dr. Oga, I would backtrack a bit and take you back to the issue of policy formulation. And I say this because I would recall again, taking you back to a year ago when you and your colleague minister assumed office or took charge of the ministry. One of the things you said that you threw out there was the fact that you do not intend to reinvent the wheel. In terms of policy formulation, how far have you been able to push the policies that you found or you met in place, and how has that helped your ministry or driven the process so far?
Well, like you said, government is continuing, and I can tell you that what we met, I want to say that I want to appreciate our predecessors, Governor Fayemi and Buhari. They started with they did a great job. They brought the roadmap for the sector, and we are leveraging on that roadmap, and we are impacting positively on what they started. And if you look at it today, they started the issue of the gold bar, which today is a reality. Some of the key things we brought, which is like value addition for all minerals, which we are doing. Currently, before now, they started the NIMEP, the National Integrated Mineral Exploration Project. They started it, and today is almost a success, because the reports coming are very useful, are impactful, and it's going to help the nation in terms of revenue and data generation. So I believe that there's a lot that has been done. One thing is that we've never jettisoned anything they did in the past. We are putting ourselves on the same pedestal, working with what we met on ground and improving on what we met on ground, and taking the sector to the next level.
Pick a subsector, Dr. Oga, and give us an idea of where it was or what you met on ground and where it is right now at the moment. Pick a subsector.
Take, for instance, the artisanal mining.
Fantastic.
Today, you can see the success being done over the period in terms of artisanal mining. The miners before now, Nigeria is a place that people never believed that mining is something that people can make livelihood out of. But today, the artisanal miners have been taken to the position that, look, you can make a living out of this sector. You can create wealth for yourself out of this sector, and that is what we are doing, formalizing them, bringing them into cooperative, helping them to access funding, helping them to access equipment. This helps them for them to build on their foundation. And I can tell you that a lot of artisanal miners are becoming wealthier than where we met them a year ago, because a lot has been done in helping them to achieve their dreams and visions.
Okay, fantastic, great. That speaks to the issue. But we've often talked about potentials and the rhetorics of how well we can do in solid minerals. I mean, it's quite a popular one for us. Yeah, we've heard it time and time again. Let me ask you something as basic as data which is at the heart of the industry. Well, what have we done for prospective investors in terms of geophysical survey, for instance, and geoscience data, if we hope to foster the kind of growth that we envisioned for the sector?
Thank you. Like I told you before we came in, there was a project which Mr. President graciously approved, which has to do with geoscience data.
Okay.
And that project is currently going on. And a lot of information is coming out from there, that project.
Okay.
And that, by the time we are done with the project, we're going to create a data room for investors to visit the data so that you'll be able to, just like what is done in oil and gas, you'll be able to see the data, the viability of each mineral that you want to invest in. You want to invest in, you want to see the data, you want to see the commercial quantity, you want to see the viability, you want to see is this mineral in commercial quantity. We'll take you to the data room. You'll be able to see what we have, and that will help you to invest in that particular mineral. So data will soon be a thing of the past in terms of data availability in the ministry. So I believe that we had some data in the past, but to so many people that is not enough, and that is why the president graciously approved the NIME project, which is currently ongoing, and at the end of the project, a lot of information will be out there for investors to see. Yes, it will be controlled. It's something that's going to be in the data room for you to come, see it, and then people are going to bid for these blocks so that the country will raise a lot of revenue through the project. So I believe there will be a lot of data for investors to see, and that will help them to make up their mind to invest in the sector.
I truly and honestly hope the process is facilitated or fast-tracked.
Actually, if not because of the COVID-19, by now, a lot of information would have been out there for people to know that, yes, this is what we've done currently. But because there's a setback, but I can assure you that a lot is going on, and by the grace of God, soon we will have a meaningful data bank for people to have a view.
Honorable Minister of State, in our quest to evolve strategies for the sector as well as take ownership and drive the process, how far have institutional reforms taken shape in agencies like the Nigerian Institute of Mining and Geosciences, the National Metallurgical Development Center, and the Metallurgical Training Institute, NTA? Let's just take it one at a time, and perhaps begin with the first one, and you tell us how far the reforms have gone in the Institute for Mining and Geosciences.
Thank you. The one good thing for us to understand is that the institutional capabilities were set up to ensure that they drive the capacity of people in the sector. First, you talked about Nigerian Institute of Mining and Geosciences in Jos. That institute is properly set up for the purpose of mining exploration and mineral exploitation engineering processes. This school is a school that is set out for practicals. It's a school that is set up to differentiate from conventional courses in the universities or the polytechnics to the practical aspect of it, where people can be taken to, you'll be taught on how to make jewelries, where people will be taken to, you'll be taught on how to do actual exploration, where people are being taught about how you can ensure that you understand the processes of mineral engineering and processes. They are well cut out structures, lectures, detailed. People were cut out from all walks of life. You have lecturers from the university, you have people from the academia, you have people from the business world assembled to see that that place gives the best for the industry. And I can attest to the fact that a lot of students that passed through that school today, they are wonderful set of graduates. Because we're looking at skill. It is not just about certificate. We are looking at skill that when you come out, you'll be able to be an entrepreneur on your own. You don't need to depend on white-collar jobs. But based on the certificate or the skill that you've acquired, you'll be able to stand on your own.
Let's fast forward to the National Meteorological Development Center and how much so it has been able to meet its mandate. If I do recollect, it is supposed to help develop indigenous workforce in steel development. How far and how realistic has this been so far?
Yes, as you know that school was a partnership agreement between Nigeria and Germany through a company called GTZ. And then when that relationship commenced, the school was built. It started first in Onitsha. Today they are in Nkwo with a full-fledged institute. In fact, that school is one of the, in fact, like I said, all the institutes in the ministry, they are what the country needs for now, because they are institutes for the future. They are institutes that train people for skill. In that school, their students are the best in terms of nomadic engineering, in terms of auto engineering, in terms of mechanical engineering, in terms of welding. In the oil and gas, they are used. In the industries, they are used. Everywhere. And one thing we've done is that through the same mind endeavor, through this intervention in the ministry, we've been able to acquire new equipment needed for the school. The school has a lot of equipment that if you want to do underwater engineering, you learn it there. Any type of, engineering work you can think of, you have the equipment there. In terms of auto engineering, you have it. Most of the best auto engineer that can fix any type of car passed through that institute, and today they are entrepreneurs. These institutes are created to make Nigerians coming up as entrepreneurs. You don't need to depend on white-collar jobs, and I can attest to the fact that the institute has done very, very well.
Well, it appears to be all good news, Honorable Minister of State. I've been listening to you. And
like I said, the institute was part of when there was a Niger Delta training for the Niger Delta students. We used the institute was one of the institutes that created a very special training skill for most of the students from the Niger Delta region, and today most of them are happy. In fact, one thing I can tell is that most students that pass through that institute do not want any other certificate. They want to just be entrepreneur because they are good at what they are doing. I've had opportunity of interacting with some industry players in Onitsha and the rest of them, and most of their output has always been wonderful. I'm using, in fact, I never knew the guy came from the NTA until one day I asked him, where did you come from? Because I found the guy to be so good in his electrical engineering work in my factory. And he said, look, I passed through MTI and I'm a happy person. I love doing, because we are well taught on how to be dependent on our own. So I believe that what they have, what the government of this country have done to this institute is to equip the future Nigerians.
Dr. Oga, we're fast losing time, so I would have to hurry you along. Yeah, let's quickly move on to, and I will go back again to the issue of mining. And if I do recollect that 20 licenses were granted for coal mining around Kogi and its environment. These licenses were to be used for power generation. It's been years since these licenses were granted. In fact, I'm talking about the coal to power vision. Where are we right now with that project?
Well, like if you look at the coal is one of the key minerals that is to be developed in the ministry. Yes, we have licensed over 20 coal licenses. Some of them are used as a means of firing some equipment in some of the cement industries. If you go to Ashaka Cement, you have them. If you go to Obajana, you have them. The same thing happens in other areas. However, there are some key coal licenses that we are given for the essence of establishing a power project. And you know, power projects are nothing that comes up overnight. There are processes, and you know that the people that are giving these licenses need to look for funding for them to be able to carry out this project. These are individual private sector people. It is not government coal licenses. They were licenses granted to individuals who are investors in the sector, and they are currently carrying out their due diligences with their banks and all the processes, all the exploration projects that are going on. So that's one of the things that most time people run away from mining, because it's one area that the gestation period is a little bit long. So I can assure you that in the next few years, you see some of these key power projects coming up, because there's a lot of coal to power projects that are being instituted here and there by private sector people.
You've talked about the vision that you met on ground. You've talked about the need not to reinvent the wheel, of course, continuity. Looking ahead to the future now, in spite of the reality on ground, you've also talked about, you are very optimistic about the investment opportunities and, inherent in the sector. And looking ahead now, what projections are you making for the future? Where do you think will be in the next 2-3 years, for instance?
Like you said, currently
in solid minerals development,
yes,
now,
solid
not
mineral
just
development.
mining.
Yes. Today, the solid mineral or the mining sector contributes about 0.5% to the sector. We are looking at in the next 4-5 years, we'll be doing like 5% of the GDP. And I can attest to the fact that that would be a great leap, and it has never happened before. We are taking the position from 0.3 to 0.5, and we are moving. And if not for COVID, I can assure you, if not for COVID, would have gone beyond
COVID-19.
Sorry, if not for COVID-19, would have gone beyond
where you are right
where
now.
We are currently. And like I said yesterday, the young man that was asking me a question in TVC was talking about mining. It's not about gold mining licenses. We are talking about gold refining licenses. The federal government has licensed 2 gold refining licenses. We are still ready to do more. We have so many gold licenses. We are asking that these 2 gold refining licenses will be there to help to refine all gold that are being mined in this country, and many more. A lot of state governors are equally in question on how to get involved in establishing their own gold refining license. So I believe Nigeria is on the path of history. Nigeria is on the path of glory. There's a lot that this president has done. He has brought us from obscurity, from people not knowing that, look, this is the way to go. Today, everybody in Nigeria is understanding that, look, we have left where we started from. We've left agriculture, we've left mining. We are going to the next level. So today, a lot is being done in this country. Nigerians are getting aware, and this is helping to create employment for the teeming Nigerian youth. Like I said, in the next 10 years, should be able to lift 100 million Nigerians out of poverty. And that's what we are doing. You can see what we have done in the artisanal mining. A lot of them, there's a lot of wealth creation for these artisanal miners. And then some of them are richer. They are no longer dependent on people fleecing them, giving them maybe half of it. Central Bank will be buying this gold at international price. So a lot is being done. What are we doing to create wealth for this nation, for the Nigerians, and make them understand that this is is a sector to go. Like I told people yesterday, I said the fourth industrial revolution is all about minerals. Whether we like it or not, oil will be gone. It is all about. If you look at few days ago, there was a picture of the Sultan of Brunei, going with a security of just a miniature of a robot. It's all about minerals. Everything we have here is all about minerals. Everything in this studio is all about minerals. Indeed. So that is the way to go. That is the future. And God has blessed Nigeria that we have what the future needs. We have what the world needs. We have what it takes to take over the world. Everything lies in the hands of every Nigerian to make use of the opportunity we have today, because the future belongs to those who believe in the dream of their future. Thank you, and God bless you.
On this note, I mean, you couldn't have said it any better. I mean, that is passion speaking there. I want to thank you very much, Honorable Minister of State for Mines and Steel Development, Dr. Uchechukwu Oga. Thank you so much for coming to share your thoughts with us here on Insight on this very delicate, very profound matter. It's been a pleasure having you here. We hope to bring you back sometime in the future and review some of what we've said here. Thank you so much for coming on Insight.
Thank you, and God bless you.
Next, we take a look at how powerful a form of art can truly be. Poetry has played critical roles in the evolution of man and society, helping not just the poets to process emotional and sometimes experiential turmoils, but providing an avenue for communities to vent collective grief and get over painful psychological experiences. DK Chukwumeriju joins me via Zoom to discuss these and more. DK, I've often heard these, I mean, accomplished poets like yourself say that the human being is the essence of poetry, and that the essence of the human being resides in poetry. Can you simplify that for us and explain how with poetry we express something substantial belonging to ourselves, and we rediscover something substantial of ourselves as well?
Thank you for the question, Nnamdi. The thing about it is by its very nature, poetry is suited for expressing deep emotions, feelings, half-processed thoughts, sort of the subconscious. Poetry is a powerful tool for tapping into the subconscious, because unlike in the case of prose, when you're writing prose, you write in sentences, you write in complete thoughts. But when you're writing poetry, you write in sentence fragments, you write in phrases, you write in clauses, so you don't even have to understand what you're writing about to write a poem about it. Because poetry is all about expressing the subconscious, expressing our confusion, expressing the raw emotion before you fully processed it. And that is why it's such a powerful tool for capturing the true personality, because all of us have two parts. There's a part when we've packaged ourselves and we're ready to come outside. So we have that face. But then we have the face, that we wear at home. When an experience hits you, before you've had time to process it, to think it through, to choose the finest words to express it, poetry is a powerful tool for capturing that raw moment. And that is why it is so integral to our personality, to who we are. Poetry is very natural. Everybody expresses himself or herself in poetry at some point or the other in their lives. It's inevitable, because poetry is the cry of the subconscious.
Okay.
So every time something happens to you that you've not fully understood, but you start trying to write it down, you'll be writing in a very poetic language, because poetry is a language of the subconscious.
Relate that to current happenings right now. I mean, we're in the thick of the pandemic, and there's so much happening around. In fact, we have what we call the new normal now. I mean, how does poetry speak to our current reality?
I mean, poetry is even more powerful at a time like this, when we're grappling with something that we can't quite understand yet. The world is going through an unprecedented experience. It's never happened in human history, where a virus shuts the whole world down this way. To the best of my knowledge, this is the first time in sort of the history of civilization. So lots of people are grappling with very unprecedented nature of the circumstances. Then there is the fear, the atmosphere of fear, of death, of losing your job, of how the future would be. So there's a lot of emotional content that people are grappling with, a lot of emotion, a lot of trauma within them in different directions. So this is a very good time for people to find release from within themselves by writing. Write down your fears, write down how you feel, write down how you are. It's not, when you're writing poetry, you're not writing to impress anybody. You're not really writing to send a message to anybody. You're writing for yourself first. That's the basic foundational level of poetry. You're writing so that your heart can breathe. You're writing so that you can ease the pent-up emotions within you. So just write how you feel, write about your fears, write about your anxieties, write about your thoughts of the future. And as you get these things off your chest, then you then begin to find the peace, the clarity to see the future clearly. Because for us to move forward, we have to lose the fear. We can't see the future clearly when we're full of fear. And poetry is a means of dealing with that inner fear and trauma and just having some peace and clarity in your mind.
We'll look at some form of poetry now, but let's, in the course of our discussion, but let's give some historical perspective to this discourse. Do tell, how exactly does the present day spoken words and performance poetry, like you do, with its multidimensional forms of expression, sometimes incorporating songs like you do in some of your performances, sometimes capturing storytelling narratives, rhythms and rhymes, and even sometimes dance. I have seen you do some dance in some of your performances. How exactly does it differ? Perhaps how has it evolved from the ancient indigenous oral traditions here in Nigeria?
Well, I try to dance. I just call me trying to dance. But performance poetry does not, in truth, it is poetry going back to its indigenous roots. Okay. Because poetry did not start out as an academic discipline. It didn't start out as this obscure art form that you sort of have to have a dictionary beside you to understand, have an idea of what the person is saying. Poetry started out as a form of storytelling, as a way of making stories more memorable. Before we invented writing, in oral cultures and traditions where information has to be passed orally and remembered. And when you put a story or when you put information in stanzas, in rhythm, in rhyme, it helps the brain remember it. So it helps you to pass information from generation to generation. And when you've not invented writing. So poetry is an integral part of any indigenous storytelling culture. And so the kind of poetry I do, for me, it's going back to the roots of poetry, going back to how poetry was, using poetry to tell stories, incorporating music, incorporating dance, incorporating response. So you say something, like in my culture, whenever we're telling stories, you have these songs like Oda Ramuto, Oda Ramuto, and as you're singing, the audience is responding, so there's that participation, so I try and use poetry in that sense, So spoken word, in a way, is not a postmodern type of poetry. It's actually poetry looking back at its roots. Traditionally, there are three types of poetry, and narrative poetry, storytelling poetry is one of the oldest forms of poetry, so spoken word poetry sort of harks back to that tradition. So it's not like a new invention. We're not inventing anything new. As Africans, we've been telling stories in this way.
So it basically finds its roots in ancient oral poetry like we have in Nigeria, yeah. But DK, there's another idea that I find quite intriguing. If poetry is an effective means of bringing our attention towards better and conceptualizing injustice. Can it also play a dual role in helping us cope with issues of injustices. JK, you and I know that a good lot of some of these social justice issues cannot be solved overnight. Do you consider the cathartic role of poetry more important than that of social commentary?
That's an excellent question. And it goes back to a huge debate, in the creative space about the role of art, the primary role of art. Is art a tool for escaping the realities of society, entertaining people, making them laugh, making them forget their sorrows? Or is it a way for motivating people to face the realities of society and make it better? So is art a tool for social change, or is it just a panacea? Is it just a way of escaping the reality of society? Now, art can play both roles. It can play both roles. You can use art just as therapies, self-therapeutic, to make you forget, to make you laugh, to make you forget the broken roads, the lack of light, the people dying in hospitals without drugs. You can use art to forget all that and just have a good time. Or you can use art to inspire yourself to find new solutions to these problems. I belong firmly to the school of thought that, the primary goal of art is for social change. That art should be used to challenge the society and to try and push society forward. I'm not saying that the cathartic role of art is wrong or whatever, but I'm saying that I believe that art should have a more proactive role, that the artist should be proactively involved in trying to make his or her society a better place by telling stories, creating songs, creating poems, plays, dramas, movies that lift the thinking of members of the society to a higher level. Because when people have their thinking lifted or expanded, then because I'm an idealist, I believe that ideas come before reality. So if you change the way people think, then it will immediately change how they manifest, how their society, the forms that you see around them. So I'm very, very committed. I believe strongly that art should also be a tool for social change. It should not just be a tool for entertaining or for helping us escape the realities of our society.
Great. It would seem with each passing moment that we speak, it would seem that the role of art, poetry, for instance, is quite generic. But DK, let me read you an excerpt from Marie Awi's book. I don't know whether you've come across it, What the Living Do. It is essentially a poet's analysis of the role of poetry in society. And she very clearly reflected that in this quote, and I quote, "One thing is for certain, poetry isn't going away anytime soon. Like society itself, it is likely that the role of poetry will be forever changing, adapting itself to the needs of society as poets see fit and as human experience necessitates." I mean, end of quote. Do you concur with this assessment or assertion? I beg your pardon.
I do. I think poetry is an integral part of the human being. Like I said, poetry is it's an art form that is very, very that makes it very easy for you to express your subconscious. And self-expression is a human need. People need to express themselves. If people don't express themselves, they're like an oven, that is just hooking up within it and it's going to explode someday. So self-expression is important in human society. Communication is important. We need to be able to communicate with each other, to be able to make each other feel understood. And these are things that poetry does, very effectively. And in the world that we're living in today, because globalization has made the whole world, one community, it also means that people that 50 years ago were separated by distance, oceans and mountains and, the dangers of long distance travel. Today, we're all neighbors. Everybody is everybody's neighbor. And that has also led to an increase in tension because microcultures are now living beside each other. And one of the role of art is to mediate between microcultures, to help the North see the South, see itself through the eyes of the South, to help the South see itself through the eyes of the North, to help the man see the perspective of the woman, to help the Christian see the perspective of the Muslim. This is what art does. So as society becomes more compact, as we all come together in this global village, the need for communication, the need for empathy, the need to see the other person's perspective is only going to grow greater in the near future which means that the role of art, the role of genres like poetry is only going to become even bigger going into the future.
DK, I cannot agree more with you. In fact, I'm not sure how much you remember from our first encounter 4 years ago, but you did inspire me to try my hands at the spoken words. I'll play back a clip which incidentally featured one of your works and helped shape my thoughts on poetry and the Nigerian society. Let's have that. My Nigeria, a paradox of sort, an oxymoron of missed opportunities, yet not taken seriously by some. Soothsayers, gainsayers have had their time, but what's meet enter the fray, not to bray, but to pray.
Do you not know that poverty is not an Ijoman? He will not spare the rest of us and afflict only the Ishan. He will step across the river and come across the border. So when the drums sound, let everybody answer.
Poets speak, but these days nobody answers. The dying art is worse than cancer. Their food for thought lights the lack of thought in a society in their need of the Midas touch.
Even now, you find a lot of modern poetry very angry, very critical of society and politics. It just seems like poetry just lends itself very readily to that.
The spoken words surely is giving new answers to the quest and questions raised by today's poets. They render not in duet, but in verses soaked in ancient capsules. And so do not think too much of this narrative, because like you, I am in this nation a native, whose hope, just like yours, is for a better day in March and April, not just in May. Well, yours truly felt quite accomplished after that piece. But seriously, DK, what are you more concerned
really
with when it comes when you're done with the project? Is it the expectation of change, or perhaps the lifting of the minds and consciousness of your audience to a place that you envisioned already?
And that is always my objective. My objective is always to have an emotive impact. I don't just want people to engage with my work intellectually. I don't just want them to engage, with it in the context of entertainment. I want my work to penetrate people and lodge itself in their hearts. I want them to have an emotive response to it. I want them to be moved by it. I believe that nation building is also synonymous with storytelling. A nation is not just roads and bridges. A nation is also the stories you tell about it. A nation is also the emotions it evokes. A nation is also the memories you have of it, of your childhood within it, of your teenage years, of where you first fell in love, of how you had a carryover at university, of when you traveled for NYSC and learning a new culture, of when you went to a certain city and started looking for a new job and you were knocking on doors and you were finding rejection, of the people that helped you across tribe and across religion, of how you found your footing as a man or a woman within a society. All these stories come together to make a nation. It is a living thing. It's not just infrastructure. And it is the role of the artist to articulate that story so that people can feel it within their hearts. You cannot change a country you do not love. You have to love her first before you can change her, before you can build her. It's not after you've built her that you love her. Change and development comes from loving a country. And it's the job of the artist to evoke that emotional response to that geopolitical space that in the end inspires people to overcome incredible odds to build that country. So this is how I see what I do. And these are my own sort of motivations.
Dick, I noticed, did you not say anything about my poetry, my poem?
I did. You cut me off.
Sorry.
Really
please say that.
I said that was really good.
Please say it again. I didn't hear you the first time.
It just flowed. was good. I'm impressed. I will bring
Thank
you
you.
out and
Thank you.
like to-
Coming from you, that's a big one. Thank you so much. As a vehicle for transmitting human knowledge and values, it would seem that poetry gives a sense of good and evil as well as history. I mean, you've talked about that. How dangerous and delicate is that particular role for a poet like yourself? Are you sometimes conflicted between self-preservation and the morality of speaking out or speaking up?
Sorry, can I have the question again to understand what you're asking?
Okay, no, I actually said I wanted to know your thoughts on this issue, that as a vehicle for transmitting human knowledge and values, it will seem that poetry gives a sense of good and evil and sometimes of history. And then I said, how dangerous and delicate is that particular role for a poet like yourself? Are you sometimes conflicted between self-preservation and the morality and imperative for speaking out on issues, no matter how dangerous or delicate they might be?
Yes, I mean, it is a conflict that every artist, and I dare say every person faces, that conflict between self-preservation, saying what would sort of keep you safe, and then speaking the truth or what you believe is the truth. So I face that same conflict every day as a poet who speaks on very delicate socio-political issues. And for that reason, I am learning to master the art of, like they say, counting your teeth with your tongue. So I think very carefully before I say anything, because I am aware of the society into which I am speaking, where things can very easily be taken out of context, and seemingly harmless words can lead to very intense reactions from different parts of the country. I've learned to think very carefully before I say anything in order to navigate those waters.
So, would it therefore suffice, DK, to say that the social function of poetry varies with the poet?
The social function of poetry varies with the poet.
Would it be true to say that?
Yes, it would, because not every poet has a social conscience. Not every poet needs to have a social conscience. Like I said, poetry can simply be used as a vehicle for expressing your subconscious.
Indeed.
You can simply use it for very personal reasons. So not every poet has a social burden, a social conscience, or needs to. So the way we come at poetry and what we use it for would vary from poet to poet.
Indeed. DK, I cannot let you go. We're out of time already. Our time flies. It's been a delight speaking with you, but I cannot let you go without asking you for a short and quick performance. Do you have something you can give our viewer very quickly?
There is no poem that is very quick. Every poem.
A quick one, maybe just the first verse of any of your very quite profound works, rather.
In times like these, I would like to share maybe the first verse of the poem "The Wall and the Bridge." If a white man turned and called me nigger, my blood would boil in righteous anger. For the evil of discrimination is clearly established when a white man tries to treat me like rubbish. What if Hausas say Igbos are greedy and crude, and Igbos say Hausas are haughty and rude, and Ijo says the Shekiri must die today, and Eza tells Zulu there is no other way? If Yorubas declare it is owl or nothing, and we use federal character to share everything, so before you can even smile and tell me welcome, you must first ask me where my father is from.
That is deep, very quite deep and profound. DK Chukwumerije, poet extraordinaire and creative content producer. It's been an absolute delight engaging you in this conversation. Thank you so much for bringing your spark to insights. I'm hoping that in the near future I'll bring you back on the program and we can speak more. Thank you so much for coming on Insights, DK.
Thank you so much for having me, and brilliant questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, we join Elizabeth Omoruyi for the media review segment.
currently considerable international debate around schools and containment of infectious diseases. In Nigeria, the federal and state governments have put in place measures to ensure that pupils and students are protected from diseases as they learn. On the Media Review segment this week, my guest, who is an educationist, will make suggestions on how to protect the sector and those concerned post-COVID-19. And my guest is Mr. Babatunde Oluwaju. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Babatunde.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, COVID-19 has changed the manner at which we all do things. First, we're happy that exiting students have gone back to school for their exams. What is your position about this decision?
Well, to start with, we're all under considerable pressure for schools to reopen. So, it's been very difficult for them. So, I could understand the pressure to go back. However, there's a need for a fine balance between the need to go back, the need to get our teachers, especially those in the private sector, back to being productive and being able to earn and sustain their family. But we need to be careful, as I said. There's a need for a fine balance in the national public interest. We want to balance the larger public interest with the interest of the students, interest of parents themselves, who are equally under pressure because the economy is opening up. Many parents have to go back to work and they can't afford to have these kids at home because the cost of keeping them at home is equally enormous. So we need to do the gradual opening the way government has started by allowing those who are in their final year, as well as those who are supposed to be doing the GSS3 exams, to at least go back to school, and then let's see what happens. We can use this as a test run, and on the basis of what comes out, on the basis of the outcome, we can now consider the possibility of opening schools, for every of the students. And the more reason why we even need to be careful is that in some other countries, where they have rushed into opening schools, we have seen a resurgence of COVID-19 infection. The US is a good example. So I think we need to be careful. The government has started well by saying, okay, let's do a test run with the final year students, and then let's see how things pan out.
Okay, we must give credit to the federal government for its efforts during the lockdown, because many students were able to learn online. Don't you think e-learning should be fully embraced?
Well, it should be fully embraced. So probably it's something it should be part of our long-term educational plan. But if we rush into it the way we have been forced to do because of COVID-19, a lot of children will be left out.
We're happy that exiting students are writing their exams now under strict supervision and adherence to safety protocols. How can we ensure that disease outbreaks do not affect the sector?
Well, for me, it's about investments, long-term investment in the health sector. The education sector does not exist in isolation. It is part and parcel of the larger Nigerian society. So the effectiveness of our health system is what will determine how well we can manage diseases in our schools. Just like you mentioned in one of your questions, we are now faced with the reality that e-learning is something that we need to embrace. The world will not wait for us to embrace it. The world is already going that way. So I think as part of our educational planning, the government should start to, we should start to infuse elements of e-learning so that gradually over time, we can build the necessary infrastructure that is needed to deliver e-learning. Because e-learning is something that it requires a lot of investment in terms of the infrastructure that you need to promote it. And I think that's where the government should start as part of educational planning to start to infuse elements of this so that we can start to build those infrastructure that can lead us to successfully implementing e-learning in our schools.
Mr. Babatunde, thank you so much for your time. I want to thank you for coming to our studio to share your thoughts with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much. And that's it on the Media Review segment this week.
And that's it for this episode of the program. It's been quite a delightful one, I dare say. Do join us same time next week for more on Insights. I'm Nnamdi Odipo.
And I'm Elizabeth Omori. We'll see you next week.
She cries. She cries in anguish and in pain. She bears the scourge of her grief.